Let's take an imaginary trip. First, imagine that you are on the Texas border looking across the Rio Grande River into Mexico. You can tell from the vegetation that it's a dry region, and you guess that it gets very hot in the summer. Over there is a small Mexican village. Perhaps you wonder what it would be like to live in such a small, isolated place. Now imagine that you are on the shores of Lake Titicaca in the Andes mountain region of South America. It's a little hard for you to breathe because the elevation is 3,600 meters above sea level and there is much less oxygen in the air than you are used to. For a change of pace, pretend that you are in the Amazon basin, exploring the world's largest river, which flows through the world's greatest rainforest. These are only a few of the fascinating places in the vast region known as Latin America. Latin America includes the southern part of the North American continent and all of the South American continent. The North American part of Latin America is called Middle America. It includes Mexico, the 7 small countries of Central America, and the many island countries located in the Caribbean Sea. The Isthmus of Panama is a narrow neck of land that links Middle America to South America. This isthmus separates the waters of the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. The Panama Canal was built early in the 20th century to allow ships to pass between the two oceans, so they wouldn't have to go around the whole continent of South America. Mountains and high plateaus cover large parts of Latin America. In northern and central Mexico, a high plateau lies between 2 great mountain ranges. These mountain ranges rise up from narrow coastal plains. The northern part of the plateau is very dry and better suited for ranching than farming. The southern part of the plateau gets more rainfall, enough to grow corn and other crops. This part of the plateau includes several high basins where people have lived for many centuries. The 2,130-meter high Valley of Mexico is the most densely populated of these basins. Long ago, a large lake filled the lower parts of the basin floor. Today, the streets and buildings of Mexico City extend across most of the Valley of Mexico. At Xochimilco, on the outskirts of Mexico City, you can take a boat ride on canals that wind between small fertile islands where food and flowers are grown. These canals are all that is left of the lake that once covered most of the basin floor. South of the Valley of Mexico is a belt of huge volcanoes that crosses the country from east to west. One of these volcanoes, Mount Orizaba, is the highest mountain in Middle America. It has an elevation of 5,700 meters. Paricutin is Mexico's youngest volcano. It appeared as a hole in a cornfield in 1943. During 9 years of eruptions, it grew into the small mountain you can see today. The new volcano was named after a village that was destroyed by ash and lava during the eruptions. The ruins of a church buried in the lava are a harsh reminder of the power unleashed by volcanic eruptions in this region. South of Mexico's volcanic belt are many more mountain ranges that are separated by fertile lands. More volcanoes rise above crater lakes in Guatemala and several of the other small countries in Central America. These countries include Belize, Guatemala, El Salvador, Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama. The most extensive lowlands in Middle America are found on the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. Yucatan extends northward from the rest of Mexico, partly separating the Gulf of Mexico from the Caribbean Sea. This large peninsula is made up of limestone rocks. The limestone originated as underwater coral reefs that were later raised above sea level. Some of the islands in the Caribbean Sea are also low platforms made out of limestone. Other Caribbean islands, such as Puerto Rico, are mountainous. They are the tops of great mountain ranges that rise above the sea floor. Moving on to the South American continent, we find the Andes Mountains. These mountains are made up of a series of parallel ranges. A mountain system like this is called a cordillera. South America's Andean Cordillera is one of the longest mountain systems in the world. It extends 7,240 kilometers from the shores of the Caribbean Sea in Venezuela to Cape Horn, which is located at South America's southern tip. Hundreds of Andean peaks are more than 4,500 meters high. Mount Aconcagua in Argentina is nearly 7,000 meters high. It is the highest mountain in the Americas. As you can tell from their conical shapes, many of the Andean peaks are volcanoes. Materials from volcanic eruptions tend to make soils more fertile, so many high basins between the volcanoes, such as this one in Ecuador, have very productive farmland. In Peru and Bolivia, the Andes peaks surround a vast high plateau. The plateau surface lies about 3,650 to 4,250 meters above sea level. This high plateau is called the Altiplano, which is a Spanish term for high plain. The Andean Altiplano is one of the highest inhabited parts of the world. A relatively large number of people live here, despite its high elevation and its cold, dry, and windy climate. There are numerous settlements around Lake Titicaca. At an altitude of 3,800 meters, Lake Titicaca is the highest navigable lake on Earth. It covers 9,060 square kilometers and is fed by water from melting snow on the Andean summits. The Andes peaks are lower in elevation near the tip of South America. However, they are very rugged because they have been heavily carved by glaciers. These glaciers extend from the Andean heights into mountain lakes and coastal inlets. The mountains of eastern South America are lower and older than the Andes. They are found in Brazil, Venezuela, and Guyana. Many valuable minerals are shipped out of these highland regions. The Guiana Highlands in Venezuela are especially interesting because their steep sides rise up to flat tops. These tabletop mountains are shaped much like the mesas in the southwest United States, but in Venezuela they are called tepuyes. The tepuyes are the remains of an ancient plateau that has been heavily eroded over the ages. Some of the rocks in the Guiana Highlands are among the oldest in the world. Angel Falls, the highest waterfall in the world, plunges down from the top of a tepuy. The region also has many other beautiful waterfalls. South America also has broad plains with large rivers running through them. The Orinoco River and its tributaries flow through the llanos of Venezuela and Colombia. Llano is a Spanish word for plain or level ground. The llanos are a tropical grassland with scattered trees on the higher ground. They are extremely dry during the period from January through April. Then, when the rainy season begins in May, much of the low ground is flooded by the rising rivers. The people who live here have a unique lifestyle that is based on moving cattle to different grazing areas depending on the time of year. Many birds and wild animals are protected on the large ranches found in the Llanos. Even more wildlife lives in the huge Amazon basin. This lowland area is drained by the Amazon River. The Amazon is the world's largest river. This great river, with its hundreds of tributaries, contains 1/5 of all the fresh water in the world. It flows through a dense rainforest. Toward the south, waters of the Paraguay, Paraná, and Uruguay rivers flow into the Rio de la Plata. The Rio de la Plata is a funnel-shaped estuary formed where the mouths of the rivers were drowned long ago by Atlantic Ocean waters. The great city of Buenos Aires, Argentina, is located on its southern shore. Iguazu Falls, one of the world's scenic wonders, lies on a tributary of the Paraná River. Nearby is one of the world's largest dams. It generates hydroelectric power from the flow of the Paraná River. The flat, grassy pampas of Argentina and Uruguay lie on either side of the Rio de la Plata. Cowboys, who are called gauchos, herd livestock on the pampas. Many crops are grown here too. Further south in Argentina are the dry plateau lands of Patagonia. Sheep raising is the major economic activity in this large windswept area. Patagonia ends at the Strait of Magellan. This water passage separates the large island of Tierra del Fuego from the rest of South America. The strait was named after Ferdinand Magellan, whose ships sailed through it in the 16th century on the first voyage around the world. The northern and southernmost parts of Latin America lie in the temperate zones of the northern and southern hemispheres. Northern Mexico, which is in the temperate zone of the northern hemisphere, is a dry land with lots of cacti and scrub brush. In the south, the countries of Argentina and Chile extend into the southern temperate zone far below the equator. These lands have a wide range of different climates. Because Argentina and Chile are in the southern hemisphere, the seasons are the opposite from the seasons in the northern hemisphere. This means that the summer months are December, January, and February. Let's look at the various distinct climates found in the long, narrow country of Chile. In the north, we find the very dry Atacama Desert. It is one of the driest places in the world. It hardly ever rains here, so there is almost no vegetation. South of the desert is a pleasant region with mild rainy winters and hot dry summers. The climate is much like that in Southern California. This kind of climate is ideal for growing many kinds of fruits and vegetables. Farther south is a zone of lakes and forests that has a mild, cool climate and year-round rainfall. The southernmost part of Chile is a windy grassland much like Patagonia in neighboring Argentina. In fact, the area is called Chilean Patagonia. Winter in Patagonia can get very cold and damp. In contrast, most of Latin America lies in the tropics, so there isn't much seasonal temperature change. However, there are several kinds of tropical climates, depending on the elevation and the amount of rainfall. Rainy tropical regions are hot and humid throughout the year. Rain falls nearly every day. The constant heat and humidity create perfect conditions for tropical rainforests to grow. Most animals in these rainforests live above the ground in the treetops. Slash and burn agriculture is a common method of using the land in rainforest regions. First, trees are cut from a small plot of land and burned so that their ashes can help fertilize the soil. Then, crops such as cassava, pineapples, and peppers are planted in the clearings. The harvest is good for only a few years because water from the frequent rains leaches away the nutrients in the soil that are needed for healthy plant growth. When crop plants stop growing well, the farm plot is abandoned and allowed to grow back up in forest. In some areas with more fertile soils, cacao trees are grown as plantation crops. Seeds from the cacao tree pods are used to make chocolate. Other parts of tropical Latin America have a distinct dry season. In these wet, dry tropical regions, we find a low forest made up of trees and shrubs. These plants are leafy during the rainy season, but lose their leaves during the dry season. Fertile lands in Latin America's wet, dry tropics are used for growing plantation crops such as sugarcane and pineapples. Banana plantations are especially important in lowland areas of Central America and Ecuador. The fruit is processed for market right on the plantation, then shipped all over the world. The driest part of tropical Latin America lies along the continent's Pacific coast between southern Ecuador and northern Chile. The cold ocean water offshore often creates foggy conditions, but there is very little rainfall. We've already seen snow-capped peaks in the Andes that are located near the equator. The tops of these mountains are much colder than the tropical lands at their bases because temperature drops as elevation increases. The changes in climate and vegetation at higher elevations creates very different landscapes in different zones on a mountain slope. This is called altitudinal zonation. Since so much of tropical Latin America is made up of mountains and plateaus, Latin Americans have developed special terms for the temperature and vegetation differences between the lands lying up and down the mountain slopes. The coasts and coastal plains of tropical Latin America are in the Tierra Caliente, or hot land. Most large settlements in the Tierra Caliente are located on or near the coasts where sea breezes make life more comfortable. The Amazon basin with its warmth-loving rainforests is also in the Tierra Caliente. Here, the largest city is Manaus, Brazil, located on the banks of the Rio Negro, near the place where this great river joins the Amazon mainstream. The Tierra Templada, or temperate zone, lies between the altitudes of 1,000 and 2,000 meters. At these elevations, the temperature is mild all year long. Coffee grows well here. Other crops such as sugarcane, corn, and bananas are grown in both the Tierra Caliente and the Tierra Templada. Many of Latin America's towns and cities are located in the comfortable Tierra Templada, where it's never too hot or too cold. Between 2,000 meters and about 3,600 meters in elevation, the air is always cool. This is the cold zone, called the Tierra Fria. In the lower parts of the Tierra Fria, the noonday sun feels warm, but if you step into the shade, you'll feel a chill. Many highland basins in Mexico and in Andean South America are in the lower part of the Tierra Fria. These basins are very productive. The climate is suitable for growing wheat, an important crop introduced to Latin America by Spanish settlers. Some of the highland basins support very large populations. Among the major cities of the Tierra Fria are Mexico City, Mexico, Quito, Ecuador, and La Paz, Bolivia. Located in a canyon about 3,600 meters above sea level, La Paz is the highest large city in the world. Potosi, Bolivia is not as large as La Paz, but with an elevation of nearly 4,000 meters, it's even higher. People live here because of the rich silver and tin resources mined from the Cerro Rico, or rich hill that towers above the town. Only a few crops, such as potatoes, can be grown at elevations above 3,000 meters. Potatoes are native to South America and were first cultivated in the Andes Mountains. In Bolivia, people freeze-dry part of the crop by leaving cut potatoes out in the cold mountain air. Most of the land above 3,000 meters is not planted in crops, but is used to pasture livestock. Sheep and the native llamas do especially well at high elevations. The Tierra Helada, or frozen land, is the climate zone above the Tierra Fria. Mountain meadows and the ice-capped summits of the highest peaks are found here. As we have seen, Latin America is made up of several parts. Latin America has many different kinds of landscapes and climates. Much of Middle America is made up of mountains and high plateaus. The Andes Mountains in South America are one of the world's longest and highest mountain ranges, but the continent also has broad lowland areas. Its Amazon basin contains the world's largest river, the Amazon, and the biggest remaining tract of rainforest on Earth. Most of Latin America is in the tropics, so there is little change in temperature from season to season. However, the tropical climates here vary greatly depending on the elevation above sea level and the amounts of rainfall. Latin America is tremendously diverse in its climates, landforms, and natural resources. This variety is used in many different ways by the region's peoples.